Okay, so back to this, and I immediately noticed that the the game's music is different. I don't ever remember hearing this track. Anyway, so to be entirely honest, I haven't had as much of an opportunity to play this game as I would like, and so that's why I wasn't able to post a video. I wasn't able to post a video last Saturday. What I want to do is I want to play a couple of the scenarios in the PTE and experiment with what they've changed. Well, this isn't going to be that. And I wasn't able to do that last week because, like I said, I haven't had that much time. Although hopefully over the next 2 weeks, not this Saturday, the Saturday after this one, and the Saturday after that, I should be able to make a couple of videos of a couple of the scenarios. Anyway, I digress. What I'm going to be doing today is I'm going to be looking over some of the changes made to the PTE build. Specifically, they released a number, they've released some changes on the PTE. They only listed these in their Discord, which I kind of would have preferred they list them on Steam, but I guess with the small changes there, or the small changes that they've been making, I suppose it doesn't make too much sense, but still I think it would have been more convenient if they released them on Steam as well. But I digress. They released some changes, and the latest round is actually the most extensive one. And that's what I'm going to be looking at today. So, here we go. Now, so if you go over to the Discord, and yes, this is the only channel or server on the Discord, or that I have on my Discord, because I honestly don't care that much for most social media. Where is it? Keep going up. Okay, there's a slight audio issue there. Rather amusing. Alright, so where is it? There's some issues with the PTE launching. That's nothing I'm really concerned about. Here we go. Small patch. The income V3 segment threshold shifted to the left by 500. I'm not entirely sure how they've adjusted the income because I haven't played the game at all since I made my videos about the PTE build. But I don't really understand this, but hopefully I'll be able to understand it better when I actually get the opportunity to play the scenarios. The long range, so high MAD's low altitude radar firing range multiplier has been put back in. Seed cruise and ballistic missile interception range multiplier for AA systems has been reduced. So I'm not entirely sure what this does, but I'm assuming it basically dictates how close a seed missile, or how close a anti-radiation missile, cruise missile, or a ballistic missile needs to get to the SAM before the SAM will try to intercept it. I assume that's what it means. What's this? Oh. But I honestly don't know. This, I think, can be made slightly clearer. Tank resurrection timers have been adjusted. Tier 1 and Tier 2 infantry resurrection timers have been reduced to 4 minutes. I honestly don't understand how the tier system works. I've seen that referenced in other places before, but I'm not entirely sure how it works. That could probably use some explanation. And seed and cruise missile rearm timers have been reduced by 2 minutes. They've also changed the Cherry Berry loadout. Close quarters. 9 AK-103s instead of the AN-94s. So... Arsenal. Armory. Naval Infantry. Cherry Berries. They have the AK-103s instead of the AN-94s. Which, assuming the stats, the damage is, honestly, I can't remember the damage values for the AN-94s prior to this change. So, I mean, I can't remember it, but I do know a way to find out. I'll be right back. Okay, so pulling up the video I made on the PTE, it seems that the AN-94 originally had, compared to the AN-103, or the AK-103, 100 meters extra range and slightly more DPS. Aside from that, it's basically the same, so it's, for all intents and purposes, it appears to be a slight nerf. The next thing they covered was, is this my, okay, so yeah, that was me. The next thing they covered, the A-10 minimum resurrection timer has been increased. The grad, they've reduced the cluster damage on the rockets. They've slightly increased the price of guard mosostrelki. Excuse me. Which, I don't know. The thing is, I'm not really one to call for, or I think a lot of people have complained that one side or the other is vastly underpowered and needs a buff. I'm not one of those people that routinely call for that. However, if I'm going to be entirely honest, seeing as we're basically talking about guards, infantry, and a Russian guards unit is supposed to be basically elite. Like, if you talk about a guards tank unit or a guards motorized infantry unit, they're supposed to be, I want to call them elite. That's not exactly the same as Special Forces, but for reference, units like the 1st Guards Tank Army, they are basically some of the best that Russia's supposed to have. Like, during the Cold War, it was the 1st Guards Tank Army's job to kick NATO's teeth in and sprint towards the Rhine should the order ever be given. That's what they were supposed to do. Now, as to whether or not they actually would have been able to do it, that's an entire argument in and of itself. But the point I'm trying to get at is they have good equipment, and this is generally reflected in the specialization. The only thing is, and this has to do with the Guards Infantry specifically, is the Guards Infantry's kind of meh, all things considered. Okay, yeah, their guns aren't necessarily bad, and they have RPG-28s that hit like a truck, but their body armor is only 6. Meanwhile, there's a lot of squads that have 8 body armor. I know I'm not necessarily saying you should raise that to 10, but just raising it to 8 wouldn't necessarily hurt. Either raise it to 8, or make them cheap or make them plentiful. But last time I knew it, you could only take 6 or 4. I could be wrong about that. Where's the guards infantry? Okay, you could take 6. Alright, well, that's not too bad, but I think on the live server you can only take 4? Not sure. Yes. Anyway. Who's that flagged? Anyway. The next thing on the list. So, to finish off the point I was getting at with the guards infantry, I don't know, I just wish their body armor was upped to 8. Actually, that's a point. What is naval infantry? Naval infantry is 8. I mean, up it to 8. What's VDV, for that matter? Descent key is 8. VDV Dishka is 8. That's 8. That's 8. That's 8. That's roughly on par with what you see in the U.S. with airborne and Marines. The Marines, or at least the front line, quote unquote, infantry unit have 8. That goes from 10 to 8. That's 8. Now all the support squads have 6. And I have a nagging suspicion that if I go over here and I look at the support squads, it's going to be... That's 6, that's 10 in their CQC, that's 8 in their standoff, that's 10. Is that 10 either loadout? Yes, it is 10 either loadout. That's 6. That's 6. So it fits the same trend as the fire support team having less armor than the mainline infantry. But you see the same thing with airborne as well. Yes, I know there's something different here. Well, I'm going to get to it soon enough. But with airborne, you have 8. M2 team, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8. So it fits that same niche as having 8 body armor instead of 6. Actually, that's a point. These guys only have 6, don't they? Yes, they only have 6. What does Rangers have? Rangers have 8. 8, 8, 10, 8. Even the sniper teams have 8, which is kind of surprising. 8, 10, 8, 10, 10, 8. And then this is, I suspect it's going to follow the same 10, 8 separation. Yeah. Okay, now I'm genuinely curious. No, they only have 6. They have 8, though. So why does airborne snipers only have 6? Huh. Other sniper units, though. VDV sniper. They have 8. Motorized. Is there a sniper team? No, there's not a sniper team here. There is a sniper team here somewhere, I thought. Is it technically these guys? Well, okay. I mean, it is kind of technically those guys, and those go down to 8. But I thought naval infantry had their own sniper team. I know these guys do. And it's 6. Okay. Motorized do not have their own sniper team. Guards don't have any recon infantry at all. Snipers. 10, 6, 6. Okay. Anyway, I digress. I get easily distracted. If this is your first time realizing this, then welcome to the channel. I generally play whatever I want, and if you want to be, if you want to come along for the ride, then just feel free to hit the subscribe button. Troopers AT, they brought the availability back up to 6, which is nice, I guess. The Grom cooldown timer has been fixed. Grom. I'm assuming, and you know what they say about assumptions, but I'm assuming what they mean is this. Because the only other Grom I can think of is the is the 2A28. So all platforms that can mount the Javelin or Spike have their aim time reduced from 3 to 4 seconds to 2 to 3 seconds. Now, because I haven't actually been in the game since, I want to take a look at something. Because it says platforms. So it's 2 to 3 there, and now where is... that's a point. Go over to here. This would have been better to use. Because troopers... I mean, it's going to be the same on troopers. 2 to 3. And then if I go to a striker, and I grab a javelin, it's also going to be 2 to 3. So this is interesting, because the reason why javelins have a longer aim time than something like Cornets or Atatkas, at least I would assume. 1 to 2. Where is 1 to 2? 1 to 2. Oh. Okay. Although these require the vehicle to stop in order to fire. So where's the T-15? Where is the there's the T-15. Because these do not. And that's still 1 to 2. Right, they mentioned this. I think I'm being dumb. I think they already mentioned this in one of the previous when they did an overview of the PTE. I think they mentioned that they lowered the aim time, but it was 2 to 3 because actually that's a point. Where is a tow missile launcher? 1 to 2. Anyway, I think it was 2 to 3 was for missiles that... You see, the aim time for a Javelin being in between 3 to 4 seconds is abnormally long compared to most ATGMs. And I have a nagging suspicion, and I'm pretty sure this is all but outright confirmed, that the reason why it has that long aim time is because the missile has terminal guidance, basically meaning that the missile has the ability to guide itself to the target after a certain point. So I suppose that justifies the longer aim time to try and keep it balanced a bit. So if they're bringing that down, I mean, I'm not I'm not complaining, but if they're bringing that down, that seems like they're trying to bring it somewhat in line with the reduced aim time for the other missiles. So it's not as much of an outlier. Because if you take missiles that normally have a 2 to 3 second aim time and you drop it down to 1 to 2, that 3 to 4 second aim time becomes even more of an outlier compared to everything else. I mean, it's a welcome change as far as I'm concerned. And next, that's the Russian version, that's the Chinese version. And then a very small update here. With the vertical launch animation for long-range SAMs has been improved. Now the thing is, there's only 2 SAMs in the game that actually well, I say 2 SAMs. There's only 2 HIMAD systems, specifically in the game, that don't have a vertical launch animation. And these being the S300PM and the S300V4. So that's basically a buff to that. That, and they've also changed this somewhat. So again, I'm not entirely sure what this does, but hopefully I'll be able to at least understand it. I honestly think it's a modifier that determines how many points you earn, or what your income is, depending on how many units you have on the field. I think that's what this is. Not entirely sure, but I guess I'll find out. And then we move on to the latest update. And this is honestly the reason why I made this video, because this changes quite a bit. First is we have a new unit. And I say new unit. I say new unit because, well, not only is it called a new unit, I'm pretty sure this is the first new unit added to the game, not as a part of a DLC. We've had some unit variants, like the CRAM instead of the CRAM. And specifically, what I mean is we have a variant where the counter rocket artillery mortar, C-RAM, is replaced with the CRAM, rolling airframe missile. We have this, and then we also have the BMD-4 series, the BMD-4, the BTR-MDM, and the Cornet D1, which all now have armor packages, which you can fit onto them. But we haven't had a new unit added to the game, short of a or we haven't had a new unit added to the game that wasn't a part of things like the Baltic Battalion DLC. Until this. The Airborne Reiki Squad. And I love this picture. I say that. This is the first time I'm seeing this. But I love this picture because there is a unit embedded in the game files. It's called Fire Team. It's a 4-man fire team. Basically, it's like the mech rifleman. It's just shaved down to 4 guys. They use the exact same picture. But you have the airborne Reiki, or airborne reconnaissance. I'm just going to call them airborne reconnaissance. And you have 2 of these. They have a sniper rifle, interestingly enough. 2 basic rifles, a DMR, a sniper rifle, and a MAUS, an M3E1, which go to infantry. I'm pretty sure has the exact same stats as the RAWs, and yet it's the M3E1. So, I don't know, I guess rename that to, well, it wouldn't make much sense if they renamed it to RAWs, because RAWs stands specifically for, if memory serves, Ranger I think it's Ranger Anti-Armor Weapon System or something like that. Not entirely sure. Theoretically, it should be RAAWS, which still comes out to RAWS, but I digress. So, I don't know. I suppose you could just call it like an M3 Carl Gustav. Because for all intents and purposes, what it is it's basically reloadable AT4. I mean, I'm pretty sure it's just like a reloadable AT4. It has pretty much the same stats. Honestly, how many shots do you get? 4? Honestly, just give everyone AT4s. But then we have a fire support squad. And nothing here seems to change very much with the stats. But we have the fire support squads. They get the AT4CS HP. There is only one other unit in the game that gets this AT4 launcher, and that is the RRC. Specifically, their close quarters. Everybody else gets the AT4CS RS. There's only 2 units in the game that get this AT4, and it fires a tandem warhead. It has a okay, so the way a heat projectile works is you basically have a hollow space inside the warhead, and then you have a copper cone, which is hollow on the inside, and then that's wrapped in explosives on the outside. When the warhead hits something, the detonator, something at the tip, which may or may not be a detonator, is crushed, which effectively sends a signal to the explosives. And this isn't the only way it's triggered. There's a variety of different ways it can be triggered. I think the method I'm describing goes to the RPG-7 specifically. But anyway, once the projectile hits the target, the explosives wrapped around the copper cone detonate. This causes the cone to invert and then sort of liquefy. It's not as simple as just saying that a molten copper jet will cut through the armor. It's more complicated than that. And it's also not quite accurate saying that it's just a jet of plasma that cuts through the armor. But for all intents and purposes, even though this is not accurate, a molten copper jet cuts through the armor and does not nice things to anything or anyone on the inside. Well, there is a such thing called a tandem warhead. Now, one of the ways of defending against a shaped charge warhead, like heat, is to use explosive reactive armor, or ERA. This is literally coating your vehicle in explosives. You would think that coating a vehicle in bricks of explosives wouldn't be very helpful, but actually it is. And, hang on. There's the M8. Because each one of these tiles contains explosives in it. And when the explosive is hit, I'll just use the one sides. When the tile is hit, the shaped charge penetrates the outermost layer, and then it basically hits the explosive and it detonates the explosive. And the detonation of the explosives, it disrupts the jet of material and pushes the projectile away from the armored vehicle, effectively neutralizing it. Now, there are different types of ERA, and ERA is particularly loved among the Russians. For example, you have things like, I believe this is called... Oh, shoot, what's it called? It's something with an R. I have no idea how to pronounce it, but it's this weird spelling. It's like... I have no idea how to pronounce it. It's not relic, but it's kind of like that. Spelled kind of like that. I'm pretty sure one of these... I thought one of these had... No. Anyway. But basically what it does is these, if you see, because explosive reactive armor can only really protect you against shaped charge rounds. It doesn't really do much against sabot rounds. So what the Russians did, and I suspect, even though I do not know, but I suspect that ERA, like the Tusk 2, with these large plates, serve the same purpose. But what the Russians did is they made the ERA much heavier, because normally the plate that sits at the outside of the box is relatively thin. It's just there to detonate the incoming shape charge projectile. Instead, what they've done is rather simple. They just beefed up the thickness of the plate, and they sort of consequently had to beef up the explosive inside the ERA block. And the idea is that the detonation of the plate and the explosive causes the sabot dart to warp, which is going to seriously degrade its penetration value. This is assuming the dart is either this is assuming the dart is not either A, snapped in half completely, which basically just neutralizes it entirely, or is blown away from the vehicle in much the same way as the shaped charge. The shaped charge projectile. Anyway, that massive tirade over, one of the reasons, or one of the ways you can defeat ERA is using a tandem warhead. And a tandem warhead, actually, hang on, where is... No. Yeah. This is kind of what a tandem warhead looks like. This launcher. I say kind of because I'm not entirely sure if that's what this is. I think it might be, but I'm not sure. Anyway, I digress. The point is that the what you basically have is you have a shaped charge in front of a shaped charge. Usually that's a smaller shaped charge. And what it does is the smaller shaped charge will detonate a split second before the main charge. And basically what the smaller shaped charge does is it's specifically intended to trigger the ERA. It triggers the ERA detonates, and after the ERA detonates, or not after the ERA detonates, but the ERA basically detonates, which defeats the smaller initial charge, while the larger main charge, or the smaller initial heat warhead, while the larger main heat warhead will continue on and basically melt its way through the armor. That's what it means by tandem. When it says things like tandem, that's what it's referring to. So when this says tandem, it's because using two shaped charges is known as a tandem warhead. But that's basically what it's referring to. The thing is that I don't understand is that if you want a non-tandem warhead, you know, you have your heat warhead and then you have your tandem warhead, why not just use a basic AT4 for your heat warhead and a MAWS for your tandem warhead, instead of the way they have it here, where you have a MAWS or a Carl Gustav with the basic warhead and the individual AT4s with the tandem warhead. The only thing I can think of is that because of the difference between disposable and reloadable AT launchers, disposable AT launchers have a much higher rate of fire than their their reloadable counterparts. So, for example, where's Marines? So, for example, a Marine squad has 6 AT4s. Is it 6? I thought it was 8. Huh. Oh well. Meanwhile, Raiders have 8 rounds for their maws. The thing is, actually, hang on. I need a better comparison. Yeah. Okay, so basically, both both Marines and Airborne have 6 shots for their anti-armor weapon. The difference is that the Airborne has the Carl Gustav, which is reloadable, and the Marines have the AT4, which is disposable. And because the AT4 is disposable, it's fired much faster than the Airborne, because the Airborne needs to reload the launcher every time they fire. You don't need to reload an AT4, you just fire it, and then you just dump the empty tube. I think you can technically reload them, but you need to send them back to the factory in order to do that. And usually that's not done. At least not to my knowledge. I mean, it might be done in a training context, like if you're training people to use it, or it may be in a very low intensity conflict, kind of like the War on Terror. But in these sort of high intensity peer on peer, supposedly, warfare that Broken Arrow depicts, I highly doubt a squad would hang on to the empty AT4 tubes after firing them off. I digress. So, I suspect they could have done that to maybe make it more inclined as an ambush tool, but I honestly don't know. Personally, I would have just given them a Moz, because at the very least, a Moz actually has a longer range. 500. That's literally the same as. That's 600. Yeah, okay. So, but that's just me. Overall, I like this. I mean, I really do. Mainly, well, one of the reasons why I like it is, firstly, it adds a bit of choice instead of just having snipers. And I like the idea that you actually have a sniper in the unit, because I think it is incredibly, not sad, but the idea of using snipers just as quiet recon teams is a bit disappointing to me. And I get it, and honestly, when it comes to what your snipers bring to the table, their ability to, like, what they can see is generally going to be far more important than anything that they can shoot. But I don't know. I think not having a it kind of falls into that sort of awesome but impractical territory. Sniper rifles, I mean. Because having a sniper rifle is, at least I think, a pretty interesting addition that allows you to be able to fire out to a long range and do some decent damage out to that range. It would make great second line fire support. But their sniper rifles are always attached to squads that are far better used just being a silent of basically being your Eye of Sauron that you can use to observe the enemy rather than shoot them. So I like this because it gives you a sniper rifle, and okay, there are a couple of units which you can use sniper rifles or which you can use in a more supportive role. For example, the Green Beret snipers are one, and then you have that specialized VMF as another. But I'm not entirely sold on that, to be entirely honest. Even if they did make that cheaper, I'm pretty sure they made that cheaper. Yeah, it's only 120. It's like 150 on the it's like 150 on the live server. So I like this for the sniper rifle. And in between these armaments, I don't know, it seems like depending on which one you want would depend on what exactly you intend to use it for. Because if you plan on using these guys alongside, like, is more basically alongside infantry like this, like for example you load airborne and the airborne reconnaissance unit into an ACV, for example, then I suppose using this loadout would be better if you actually intend them to fight in much the same way as your mainline infantry, just providing that extra reconnaissance. But the fire support isn't, or the one with the sniper rifle isn't necessarily a bad idea, I don't think. I don't know, I guess it depends on the kind of flexibility that you want. Part of me, honestly, wants to adjust it where instead of having two different versions, you just have a basic and then you have an upgraded version. So you've got like the basic one with maybe 3 or 4 AT4s, the M210, the M110, and then the M4s, and then this other version for like 30 or 40 more points gives you a Maz, maybe 3 M7s, and then like a Barrett, for example, or instead of a Barrett, the Mark 22. So it's more of a direct upgrade rather than a side grade. Part of me kind of wants to suggest that, but I don't think it would be nearly as flexible if they did do that. So I like what they've done, and honestly, I hope this unit is probably going to make it to the live server at some point, but and I kind of like the way they've done it here, but I don't know. Honestly, part of me doesn't really see the point in side grades, and that's not always the case. Like, I understand if you want something that's geared more towards standoff or close quarters. I fully get that. But there doesn't seem to be that much of a difference in how you would use these guys between this loadout and this loadout. And that's what makes me think that instead of having it just be a side grade, making it an actual upgrade would probably be better. But that's just me. Then we have a squad size increase from 6 to 7 for all of the Armor Brigade infantry, except for the Cap Scouts. Mech Riflemen, Mech Riflemen MMG, Mech Riflemen AA, and Mech Engineers. Mech Riflemen AA, they've said, and they've put here an additional FIM-92F missile added. I'm not sure if they mean a new launcher or because I think they mean a new launcher, because presumably this is the ammunition count. And Mech Rifleman MMG has the additional M240, which should bring that up to 3. Now, if we actually go here and we check this out, Cav Scouts is not going to change. I don't think this has changed at all. Mech Engineers is now 7 guys, with, I assume that's an extra M4, so I don't think much has changed here. Mech Rifleman also just has an extra M4, I think. Actually, no, I think they have an extra M249, which is not bad. Mech Rifleman AA. Oh no, they only have 1 launcher. Okay. It just has 6 missiles. So it's still 1 launcher, it just has 6 missiles. That's a little disappointing, but I suppose if you wanted to add a second launcher, you would have to increase the unit cost by at least 10 points. And then Mech Rifleman MMGs have 3 M240s, which is kind of stupid, but also kind of funny at the same time. So, and in case you're wondering, since they upped the size of the infantry, that also means they upped the seating capacity of the Bradleys. It is now 7. It's worth noting that a seating capacity of 7 in a Bradley, because one of the problems which the U.S. Has had with the Bradley for a long time is that you can't fit an entire squad in a Bradley. You can only seat 6 or 7 guys in a Bradley. Meanwhile, the average squad size is 9. So what you had to do was you had to have like the different squads. I think the original organization was like 4 squads spread over 6 Bradleys. I'm not entirely sure, but that's kind of gives you an idea of what they had to do. Now, the Bradley doesn't just carry, or it doesn't just seat 6. The variants like the M2A3 and the M2A4, I think, seat 6. But there were other variants that had 7 seats. You would have you have 3 seats on each side, and then you would also have a seat facing rearwards, right behind the turret basket. The thing is that the seating in the Bradley sort of yo-yoed between 6 and 7, depending on how much stuff needed to be crammed into the Bradley and whether or not they needed to sacrifice the space for the 7th seat for more equipment. So the idea of a Bradley seating 7 is not unusual, even if it is slightly different than the current. Like, for example, here, they obviously haven't detailed the inside of the vehicle, but there would be a 7th seat facing rearwards. The MTLB VM seating capacity increased to 14. Now, I believe I mentioned this last time when I talked about... Oh, excuse me, nose itchy. I talked about the Cherry Berries being a 12-man unit, and how the only reason why I think they made it a 12-man unit was because you could fit them easier into... Instead of basically needing... Because the only armored vehicle that you could fit them in was either a BT-3F or a BTR MDM. And if you made them if they were a 14-man unit, those are the only vehicles that you could fit them in. But if you made them a 12-man unit, you could also fit them in the MTLB VM. I think it's VM. Yeah. However, if they're raising the seating capacity of that from 12 to 14, why not make the Cherry Berries a 14-man unit? Excuse me. Because, as I believe I said in my video originally going over the PTE, the Cherry Berries were originally a 14-man unit back in the November 2024 beta. So, and if you wanted to make them a 14-man unit to make them more akin to things like Marine Raiders, I guess you could. Although if you did that, you'd probably have to up the price slightly. The Bradley family seating goes from 6 to 7. The AMPV seating goes from 12 to 9, which is a bit of a pain in the butt, I'm not gonna lie. And honestly, I've seen some people complain about the seating in the AMPV, saying that 12 is too high. Personally, I actually prefer if the seating in the AMPV was brought up to 13 or even 14. but honestly, the seating going down to 9, I get it, because you could fit squads like Rangers or Airborne or Troopers in there, but I'm not entirely sure it's necessary. Especially since they haven't actually reduced the price to my knowledge. No, it's still 145. Because when you compare the AMPV to the Bradley's cheaper. The Bradley has arguably a better ATGM. The Bradley has a worse autocannon, and the Bradley can't seat as many guys compared to the AMPV. So I don't know. Personally, I would just prefer to see the AMPV seating stay at 12, or again, maybe even go up slightly to 13. And I've seen people complain about that, but honestly, I've seen people complain that the Bradley shouldn't, or the AMPV should only be able to seat 6 people, because that's how many people it seats in real life. The thing is, the AMPV in this game is not used anything like the AMPV in real life. The AMPV in real life is kind of supposed to fit the same category as something like the M113. It's kind of sits in that same sort of battle taxi role, but not really. I think it's rather telling where if you look at the number of the 5 AMPV variants, if you look at the number that the military intends to procure, the general purpose variant is right in the middle of the military only plans to procure 522 general purpose AMPVs. They intend to procure 790 medical evacuation vehicles, 216 medical treatment vehicles, which is kind of like a mini aid station. The medical evacuation vehicles can be thought of as like a heavily armored ambulance. The medical treatment vehicles can be thought of as like where the medical evacuation vehicles take the casualty to. 993 mission command vehicles, i.e. basically a mobile command post, and 386 mortar carriers, specifically, where is it? This thing. So, the only reason, and I suppose a more accurate version of the AMPV, a more accurate setup for the vehicle, if you wanted to make the AMPV in-game more akin to what it would be like in real life, is remove the autocannon and the javelin options, so you just either have these two. I suppose you could keep the armor package and the APS. Drop the seating down to 6 and then give it like a 2,000 kilogram supply capacity. From my understanding, that's what the general purpose AMPV is like. That said, if you rip out all the supplies, I think you can actually fit 12 people in here. So, honestly, I just prefer to go up to 12, or again, maybe even 13. So you can fit a squad of Marines in here. But, I don't know. Bringing it down to 9, I can understand bringing it down to 9, but I'd also kind of like to see the price drop by about 10 or 15 points if you're going to do that. Now, I understand that they probably haven't dropped the price because this is just a PTE build and not the actual game itself. But if they keep the seating reduction and they don't drop the price, why would I use an AMPV? Just simple answer, or a simple question. There really wouldn't be much of a point in using it. The M113 goes up to seating of 14, which means that it can either fit 2 infantry units from the Armor Brigade, or Marines, or Raiders. The ACVP seating goes up to 14. Thank you. I cannot tell you how much I wanted to see this happen. And the AAVP seating capacity goes up from 21 to 22. And what this means is that you can fit inside an AAVP. Where's Marines? There's Marines. You can fit a 13-man Marine unit and a 9-man squad from anything else, instead of just one of the 8-man support squads. You could fit a 9-man squad, so you can fit like Marines and Airborne, or Marines and Rangers inside the back of one of these. Although 22, alternatively, that allows you to fit something like 2 airborne squads and then a 4-man fire support squad. Ugh. Excuse me. Or a Marine Raiders and one of the 8-man fire support squads. So, I suppose that gives you more options. And then the ACVP going up to 14, which I just really like, because that means I can fit Marine Raiders in the ACV, which is something I've wanted to do for a very long time. Because honestly, in between the two, I think the ACV is better than the AAVP. Even fully kitted out. I mean, yes, the AAVP is tougher. Yes, it can swim. But the ACV is faster. It can also swim. I'm not even sure why I mentioned that for the AAVP. That was stupid. And it has a longer range to gun. Honestly, the only thing that can make this better is if it had a... well, actually, there's two things that can make this thing better. Is if it had either an APS or a missile system. And honestly, if you fit an APS to it, you could do the same thing you kind of do with the K-16 or K-17. So you have like default and then up armored for 5, and then APS for like 20, and then up armored plus APS for 25. But I digress. The CV9035 has a price reduction for its upgrades, which drops the price down from $160, I believe, to $145. Which isn't too bad, I don't think. Especially since they've effectively nerfed the amount of kinetic protection that the armor package offered. But even without the armor package, 130 isn't... it's not bad for what you get. APS, top attack missiles, and a pretty solid auto cannon for 130. It's not terrible. I still wish you could seat 9 guys in this. But I don't know. Honestly, I haven't had any opportunity really to play around with the Baltic Battalion outside of what they give you in the Katika scenario, so I don't know exactly how this thing plays normally. I'm just gonna say that outright. Personally, I think 160 is a little bit steep for the base game version, but I will admit the armor protection is kind of funny, especially the fact that it just outright neutralizes Russian 30mm autocannons at ranges anything other than basically stuffing the barrel of the gun right up against the front of the CV90. The aim time has been reduced for the 2S1, the Hawkeye, and the Striker SPH, which I think is nice because those systems have these systems have actually, isn't the aim time already like 12 to 15 seconds on the live server? because I know they've increased the, I know they increased the aim time for artillery systems on I know they've increased the aim time for artillery systems on in one of these updates, they increased aim time for artillery systems above a certain caliber, and I thought that already. Here we go. With calibers 152mm and above, aim time increased from 12 to 15 to 16 to 20. Okay, so this on the live server is already going to exclude the 2S1, the Hawkeye, and the SPH. It's also going to exclude the Bereg. KB500, GBU53, GBU54, and GBU55 rearm timers has been reduced. So I'm guessing you take you can get aircraft back faster if it has those. Overall payload price reduced 120 to 100 for 2 GBU56s. Okay. And it doesn't specify an aircraft, so I'm assuming multiple aircraft. The ODAB 500 loadout price increased from 45 to 70 for 2 of them, 80 to 100 for 4 of them, or 110 to 120 for 6 for the Su-34, the MiG-29 SMT, the Su-24M2, and the Yak-38M. I didn't even know the Yak-38M could take these aircraft, or could take those bombs. Unless those are different bombs than what I'm thinking of. Huh. Those are 100s. Unless they're referring to these. Oh, okay, hang on. I think I'm being stupid. Not every aircraft can take all 3 selections here. So, this is just the price for the different selections. It took me a second to figure that out. The Strike Eagle, the payload for the 4 CBU 87s, where is the Strike Eagle? There we go. Fuselage, let me just get something to move that out. No, not fuselage. I mean, wing pylons, thank you. Centerline, no. Fuselage. No, I'm thinking of the SE, isn't it? Yeah, okay. I'm sorry, I got really confused because one of the changes they made in either update 1.10 or 1.11 was they took the center line and the fuselage pylons on the F-15EX and they basically merged them into a single option. And which I remember saying back then that I didn't particularly prefer because I liked the idea of being able to customize them as I see fit, and I still stand by that. But I saw the fact that it's still separate on the F-15E, and I never realized until just now that it's still separate on the F-15E. Mainly because I don't really use aircraft. Anyway, I digress. Fuselage. So now we have 6 of these instead of 4. For 120 points instead of 100. Okay. Which kind of makes me wonder. I suppose you could take out a payload like that. Or alternatively, because you could take like 12 of those, and what does that give you? 14 of those and 12 of those. You know, if you just wanted to saturate an entire area with explosives. And then they've increased the accuracy for some rocket pods, which is kind of... I'm gonna have to look at the blast radius figures here in just a second, but I didn't really think this was that big of a deal, because I figured that even if the rocket pod, even if the rocket deviated as much as it could from the point of aim, the blast radius was still large enough that the target is gonna take some damage. So, I mean, a blast radius is 28 meters out of dispersion 20 meters, so the target's still taking some damage. Actually, that's a point. APKWS. Same thing there. .28 meters there. Where is Marine Corps? And then you have the Super Cobra, which has Zunies. 28, 52. So, okay, yeah, I mean, you're basically dropping the rocket on the target's head with the new accuracy figures, and I mean, it wouldn't really matter anyway whether or not the target or the rocket lands 5 meters or 20 meters from the target. It's still taking damage. But with the Zunies, if you're basically dropping the rocket on the target's head, you're gonna mess them up quite a bit, which I think is nice. And I can look at the S8s and the S13s, but I have a nagging suspicion it's pretty much going to be the same. Okay, 52, middle pylons, S13s. I mean, the S8s actually have a slightly larger blast radius than the Hydras. Although it is a slightly larger rocket, so I suppose that does make a degree of sense. No, that's 4. Where is Super Cobra? That's 3.5. Okay, so slightly larger blast radius and slightly larger damage. Although again, slightly larger rocket as well. So, also greater supply weight. And then you have this, which has, I believe, the same damage as the Zunies with a slightly narrow or slightly smaller blast radius and with slightly more pen. Nope, the pen's the same, the damage is the same. But the Zunies have a slightly larger blast radius. Because the Zunies are actually a slightly smaller diameter rocket. The Zunies are 127 millimeters in diameter, or 5 inches, whereas the S13s are 130, or 5.1 inches. In all practical intents and purposes, I suspect it doesn't make that much of a difference. I mean, if the rocket lands anywhere near you, it's probably going to mess your day up. But it's going to mess you up whether or not it's a Zuni or an S or a S13. but it is slightly different here in the game. Also, supply weight 25 versus supply weight of 25. So yeah, it is the same. Also, I noticed the resupply time isn't listed here, which I find interesting. Anyway, that I think is all of the changes, and that this just continues in Russian and then in Chinese. And so hopefully what the plan is next Saturday I'll actually have a video of me playing a scenario. It's probably going to be Baltisk. I had originally planned to use an armored Marine Corps deck, and now I'm still probably going to use an armored Marine Corps deck, but I haven't made the deck yet. But I figured that if I did use an armored Marine Corps deck, I would have access to both heavy artillery and air defense through armored and Marine Corps. Plus, I have things that can swim. So, I have things that can swim, because, you know, it's Baltisk. So I guess I can make a deck out of that and see how it goes. But anyway, that is enough for now. I suspect this has run a lot longer than I originally intended it to. Excuse me. But that's fine. That's not really that big of a deal.